Chapter 17. That's how come, Pat went on calmly, that Jeff Perdot got locked up in jail. He came in right after Ralston left my office and got ringy when I told him I'd decided to hold on to the sheriff's badge a few hours longer. Fred Ralston thought he was talking to the new sheriff, Pat went on carefully. He had never seen either one of us, and he had told Perdot that he'd be in charge of the sheriff's office when the stage came in. I didn't tell him different because I plumb got interested by the time he got talking a little bit. He mentioned a plan that had been cooked up between him, Kitty, and Joe Dems, and he mentioned a sucker with $8,000 in cash money. The Powder Valley sheriff paused and studied the occupants of the room one by one. Harold Morgan was listening with an intent frown, seeking to add up what Pat was saying to what he had already known. Sam SLOAN had a black scowl on his face and was making a job of not looking at Kitty, who was sitting erect on the bed, listening with straining attention. Joe Dems cleared his throat and said angrily, "I don't know what all this foolishness is about. It sounds to me like you're making up a batch of lies. Fred Ralston's dead and can't speak for himself." Pat replied, "You know they're not lies, Joe. Even if I haven't got anyone to back me up, I got better proof. When Ralston came over here, he told you and that Kitty he had checked with the new sheriff and everything was fixed. You were after Sam's money, and I reckon you were going to split it 4 ways. Or maybe you and your husband were going to get the biggest part," Pat added to Kitty, "seeing how you'd worked it out between you." She wet her lips and sent an agonizing glance at Sam, who was staring down at the floor and sweating profusely. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said faintly. "I didn't have anything planned. I didn't know Fred was even coming." Pat laughed scornfully. "Well, he asked the clerk for number 15, a room that's right next to yours, and you had the door unlocked for him to walk in when you got things fixed right up with Sam." "I don't want to hear no more of this." Sam stepped forward angrily. "I killed Fred Ralston, and I'm not denying it. And maybe I'll hang. I don't reckon it matters much. Just lock me up, why don't you?" "Yeah, Sheriff," Joe Dems broke in. "These absurd accusations of yours, they mean absolutely nothing. Sam SLOAN confesses he killed Ralston. Nothing else matters." "But how did he kill him? There's those bullets that disappeared into thin air. In Powder Valley, it makes a difference whether a man dies of lead poisoning or getting knifed in the back. Makes a hell of a difference to a jury," he added emphatically. "So I reckon we better find out about those missing bullets." "Well, maybe I didn't even shoot," Sam put in hoarsely. "Maybe I just thought I did." Pat shook his head. "EZRA heard the shots in his room. 3 of them. And he'll swear to it. Let's go back to yesterday afternoon. You drank some in the afternoon, got kind of drunk, according to what EZRA says, and then Kitty made up to you in the saloon and suggested that you go up to her room for a drink, didn't she?" When Sam set his mouth grimly and didn't answer, Pat swung on the entertainer. "You admit that's what you did, don't you?" "Sure, I admit it," she cried angrily. "What of it? I told you I was crazy about Sam. I was hoping he'd ask me to marry him." "And you already had one husband?" "I thought maybe we could go away where Fred could never find us. I've never really been married to Fred. I hadn't seen him for years. I didn't think of him as my husband." Red suffused Kitty's face. She lowered her head and began to cry softly. Sam took a step towards her, his dark face contorted with pain, and Pat shook his head at him sharply. "Wait till you hear all of it, Sam. Then if you still feel the same way, I won't say a word. Sam and Kitty came up here for a drink," he went on harshly, "and in the meantime her husband had checked into the room next door She knew that. She knew he was in there listening at the keyhole. He told me it was all planned out. So she fed Sam some more whiskey out of the bottle and got him good and drunk. And they were in here drinking quite a while, as you can tell by counting the brown cigar butts on the tray. And you did get him to propose marriage, Pat went on angrily to Kitty. You sweetened up to him while he was drunk and he was kissing you, and right then your husband walks in. Pat stopped and looked at Sam scornfully. Can't you see that it was a put-up job? Of all the times in the world, for him to walk in just the minute you was kissing Kitty. Not a minute too late or a minute too soon. She and him had the whole thing planned, he went on remorselessly. She had been working you up to just that point for months, and when she figured she had you right, she wrote to Denver for him to come on. Kitty gave a little cry and sank sideways in the bed, covering her shamed face with her hands. Sam's face turned a grayish color and his mouth was clamped bitterly shut. Nothing but the old badger game, Pat went on wearily, with a few extra touches. They knew you and Ezra were too tough to play off just because you'd been caught kissing a man's wife, so they fixed it for you to think you'd killed him. And that made it different. A killing like that is awfully close to murder, and no man wants to get up in court and have that kind of story told of him. Joe Dems said coldly, You certainly worked out quite the amazing theory, Sheriff Stevens. Ralston would have been the biggest fool on earth to walk in here unarmed and provoke a man to shoot at him. Sure he would, Pat conceded quietly. And Fred Ralston wasn't that kind of a fool. Not by a long shot. He swung on Sam. Start thinking back. When you first come in with Kitty, she made some excuse to get a hold of your gun, didn't she? Sam's face was haggard. He nodded slowly. Well, come to think of it, she did. Claimed she wanted to look at it while I was pouring a drink, but she gived it back to me right afterwards, he added defensively. Sure she did, after she unloaded it. But it was loaded. It shot all right. Hell, you got 3 of the cartridges in your pocket right now. That's right. Pat Stevens reached into a pocket in his jacket and drew out the 3 bullets he had taken from Sam's .45 that morning. A length of white listle stocking came out with the bullets. Pat looked at it and grinned crookedly. He held it up by the top and asked Kitty, You ever see this before? She sat up slowly, taking her hands away from her face as though she dreaded to look, and she began. Why, that's one of my... She stopped abruptly. Pat nodded. One of your good stockings. Only it ain't so good now. Not with the foot cut off. He laid it aside. We'll talk about that directly. Right now, we're talking about this here bullets. He handed one of them to Sam, another to Harold Morgan, directing, Try the heft of them. Both of them began trying the weights of the bullets in the palm of their hands. Thoroughly familiar with .45 ammunition, a bemused expression quickly came over both their faces. Well, it appears to me it's light as a feather, mostly, Morgan ejected. He held it to examine, and then excitedly reached into his pocket for a knife. That's right, Pat encouraged him. Try your knife on the bullet part. It's made of light wood, painted over to look like lead. It'd fly all to little pieces if you tried to shoot it out of a gun. And that's what Kitty put in your 6 gun before she gave it back to you yesterday, he added to Sam. Fred Ralston didn't reckon he was walking into no danger when he came in here. You were supposed to be so drunk you'd think he was dead when he fell over after you shot him. But I reckon he didn't fall over fast enough. Dems was looking at Kitty in utter amusement. Is that true, Kitty? Did you plan all this out with your husband? You were in on it, too. Pat told him. You and Jeff both. They needed your help to put it over. What messed with everything up, Pat went on stridently, was Sam not being too drunk to notice that Ralston didn't fall fast enough after he shot, and him having a hunting knife in his leg sheath. I reckon you didn't know he always carried a knife, too, he added to Kitty. Or you'd try to get that away from him before your husband come in. It was awful, she cried brokenly. Everything just went right, but before I could stop him, Sam had that knife in his hand and was going after Fred. I figured it'd happen like that, Pat sighed. And that clears a lot of things up. Would have been better, he added severely to Kitty, if you had left real bullets in Sam's gun. A jury might let him off for shooting a man like that in excitement, but stabbing him in the back is going to be different. And just because of that, he ended sadly, I reckon he'll swing from a cotton tree. A spasm of horror contorted Kitty's face. You don't think they will? She choked out. Plumb certain sure. You'll stretch a rope, and you'll go on living, Miss Kitty. And all your life, you'll know 'twas your fault, and you should have been hung instead of Sam. That's right, she cried wildly. That's it, I killed Fred. If anyone hangs, I should. I stabbed him. Sam didn't. He just thought he did. End of chapter 17.